Chapter 2. Bella blinked owlishly at the early morning sun streaming through the window. With slow movements, she made her way into the kitchen and set the coffee pot on the old cook stove. Rubbing her eyes, she remembered the reason for her sleepless night. Jack Stevenson. Opening the blinds to the large kitchen window, she tried to get rid of the image of his handsome face and muscled body. His hazel eyes had held her captive, something which she sensed was commonplace for him. Memories returned of the few times she'd seen Jack. He'd saved her as a teenager at a science fair. Jack had chased down the thug that had dragged her into a dark alley, only to be attacked. Shuddering, she remembered the blood that flowed from his cheek as he carried her to safety. Bella had given him the only thing she kept with her to wipe away the blood, her mother's handkerchief. After she'd thanked him, he'd hurried away. The next time she saw him had been last year at her best friend Al's wedding. Jack's older brother Adam had married her friend, so it was inevitable that they would see each other. Jack still had the scar on his face, but his cynical side hadn't changed much. He was still pushy and demanding. Yet, despite all of that, she found him attractive, even though she didn't want to be charmed by him. She chalked it up to a childhood admiration for his heroic act in saving her life. "Is that coffee I smell, lassie?" The back door to the kitchen opened, and her dad's slow footsteps fell along the cold wood floor. He sat down at the kitchen table with a heavy sigh. Bella reached up to the cupboard and brought down his favorite coffee cup. Pouring the steaming brew into his mug, she set it in front of him. Bella sat on the chair beside him and frowned. "Are you feeling okay today, Dad?" "Aye, sure I am, beauty." 𝙬𝙚 Campbell reverted back to Scottish brogue from his childhood whenever he was tired or upset about something. "Wheest, are you worried?" "I always worry about you. You know that." Bella reached over and squeezed his hand, calloused from all the hours he spent working on inventions. It was because her dad had invented some household items that Jack had first connected with him. Quite a few years ago, Jack had started an online members-only website for scientists and inventors, and her dad had joined. Her dad's inventions had been featured a few times. They continued to get to know each other, and that's why they decided to meet at the science fair years ago. When Jack hired her dad as his creative projects manager years ago, her father had finally been able to have a steady income and was able to set a little money aside to help her go to college. She was grateful for that, but now she wondered if all the responsibilities her dad took on weren't too much for him. As Bella sipped her coffee, she spotted the dark circles under his eyes. "I know you worry, lassie, but I wish you wouldn't. Besides, I'm fine." Her dad sipped the hot coffee, his blue-gray eyes boring holes into hers. "If anyone should be worried, it's me." "Why's that, Dad?" "Yesterday, you actually turned down a great job from Jack Stevenson. Lassie, why would you do such a thing?" Bella squirmed under her dad's probing gaze. She'd hoped to avoid this conversation. "Listen, Dad, I know you have a great job with Jack that comes with great pay and benefits, but I just don't think it's a good idea for us both to work there." "Why ever not?" Her dad set down his coffee cup and leaned closer. "Our Jack knows he can expect me and you to be professional in our work. It wouldn't hinder his business, it would only make it better." Bella placed one hand on her dad's arm, her way of calming him down and helping him to really listen to her. "I know we would work well together, but right now I want the freedom to make my own way. I want to have the confidence that comes from being independent and getting started on my own." "I suppose I understand that, even though I really wish you would work with me. I could see you taking over my job and being great at it." "Thanks for the vote of confidence, but I'm not so sure about that, Dad. Anyway, that's not—" Her dad interrupted. "Lassie, I know that's not what you want." Her dad sighed, a crooked smile, his show of surrender. Well, you know I'll support you in whatever you decide. Thanks, Dad. You're the best. So I've been told. He winked at her. A sudden knock at the door interrupted their morning coffee. That'll be Rory. She was going to pick me up today. Bella got up and put her cup by the sink before she opened the door. Come on in, Rory. I'll just get my jacket. Her friend spoke with her dad for a minute while Bella slipped on her coat. Bella walked to the door and turned to face her dad. I only work a half day today, so I should be home early afternoon, okay? Sure thing, lassie. Her dad called out, but Bella could tell his mind was already on a new project. Today was Saturday, which was the day he used to work on his latest invention. Knowing her dad, he would be so busy on his new project that he wouldn't even notice she was gone. Bella hurried out the door with Rory to the waiting car. She took turns with her friends driving to work. Since Bella and her dad shared their only truck, they had figured out a plan. She hadn't needed a vehicle in college because she was able to walk everywhere. But now that she had graduated from college, she needed to save her money to buy a used car. As she opened the door to the car, she saw Rory's 3 aunts smiling in the back seat. Hello, Aunt Florrie, Aunt Fawn, and Aunt Mary. Bella, dear, it's lovely to see you again. Aunt Mary was the most talkative of Rory's 3 aunts. Don't mind us, dearie. We're just along for the ride. Every 2 weeks we come to Paradise Lake to get groceries and supplies, Bella. Rory looked at Bella meaningfully. Of course, I understand. Bella knew Rory's 3 aunts were very insistent that they knew where Rory was at all times. Rory mentioned that her Aunt Mel was quite bitter over a family feud from years ago, and at one point had threatened Rory. It was the reason that these 3 aunts never let Rory out of their sight. Today I'm excited to do some research for my next romance novel. Rory tossed her a wide smile. Bella was amazed at how her friend enjoyed the simple pleasures, even though her life was very confining. Maybe that was the reason she had such a good imagination and was a well-loved author. What's your newest romance about, Rory? A poor girl who unexpectedly meets a prince, and they fall in love. Rory shrugged. Hey, what can I say? I love sappy romance stories. Her friend parked in the space behind the library. They all got out of the car and headed towards the building. Bella and Rory walked side by side, deep in conversation. Bella reached over and picked up her friend's hand, squeezing it gently. In the past few years, she had grown closer to Rory, seeing her regularly at the library. It was always good to see her friend, yet Bella was grateful she didn't have those restrictions placed on her, and hoped soon Rory would have more freedom too. Rory sighed. Anyway, enough about me. How's it going in your job search? Well, I have 2 interviews next week, but to my surprise, my dad's boss offered me a job yesterday. Jack Stevenson? Yeah, I said no. I just don't think it would be a good idea to have a job with the same guy my dad works for. Besides, I want to do more and see more than I'm doing right now. Being stuck forever in the life I'm living right now is not what I want. Do you know what I mean? Bella looked at the blue sky that hovered just above their small town, imagining bigger places. I understand that, Rory grimaced as she looked at her. Anyway, I'm rambling, Rory. We should probably get inside before Molly sends a search party. Bella opened the door, and together they walked into the Paradise Lake Library. Rory walked toward the aisles that contained research books, while Bella was cornered by the head librarian. Bella, I'm so happy to see you back with us again, even if it's only part-time. Molly wrapped her big arms around Bella's shoulders and squeezed her in a tight embrace. I'm happy to be back, Molly. Well, now that you're back, I have a couple of things I'd like you to do. I know you've been studying creative design, so I was hoping you could take a look at our library's website this morning. Then later, in a few hours, I have a young girl that I'd like you to help. She struggles to read. I know how good you are with the children, Bella, so I saved that task for you. 2 of my favorite things to do. Sounds great, Molly. Bella followed the librarian to her corner office, where Molly gave her the login information for the website. After a few hours, Bella had completed the updates and redesign of the front web pages of the library's website. "It's done." Bella walked over to where Molly worked. Molly brought the library's website up onto her browser window and gushed over the new design changes. "Bella, this is beautiful. The teal and yellow colors, with a few splashes of red, make the library fun and appealing to the young people. Thank you." "I'm happy to help." "Now I'll be able to tell Vonda at the town office that our library website no longer gives our small town a bad reputation. She'll most likely ask you to redesign the town office website, which is horribly outdated, by the way, but don't tell her I said so." Molly gave a cheeky grin. "Now I want to introduce you to a beautiful young girl who needs your help." Bella grinned at how competitive Molly was with the other offices in town. The town librarian was an unpredictable mixture of fun and sass, which she sort of liked. She followed Molly to the children's section of the library, where they found a dozen young children busy turning the pages of picture books. "Angel, I have someone I'd like you to meet." Molly spoke quietly to a young girl who looked to be around 8 years old. The little girl stood to her feet and pushed back brown hair that hung in strands by her face. Slowly, she peered up at Bella. Bella crouched down so she could see Angel's eyes. "I'm Bella, Angel. Nice to meet you. Do you like stories?" "Yes," the little girl lisped, her fingers toying with the end of one of her thick braids. "Me too. Would it be all right if I read you a story today?" The little girl nodded and ran over to the bookcase filled with children's books and pulled one off the shelf. "Let's go outside and sit in the sun to read today, okay?" Angel slipped her hand in Bella's, and they walked outside towards a bench shaded by a tall poplar tree. The little girl curled up on the bench beside Bella as she started reading the story. She was about halfway through the book when suddenly they were interrupted. "Well, if it isn't Bella Campbell. It's been too long since we last saw each other." Mason Rogers stood in front of her, his large shadow spilling over both of them. As usual, her ex-boyfriend had his buddy following close behind. His constant sidekick from school had stuck around. "Hello, Mason." "It's no surprise that we find you at the library, isn't that right, Chuck?" Mason elbowed his friend, who only grunted a response. "Hello, Chuck. It's good to see you." Bella was irritated that Chuck was once again being used by Mason as a pawn in his sordid mind games. Chuck hung his head and whispered, "Hello, Bella." "What do you want, Mason?" Bella didn't have time to play games. She'd finished dealing with Mason when they went their separate ways in high school and didn't want to begin again. He had been the star of the football team and chose to spend his time making himself look good or adding another beautiful girl to a notch on his belt. Both of those things he'd done while he dated her. It looked like Mason hadn't changed much after 5 years. "Same thing I've always wanted. You, darling." Mason put one hand on the wooden bench that was behind her head and leaned in close to whisper. "You still look good. If you were beside me, you'd look even better. We always were the best-looking couple around, Bella." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry out in indignation at his self-inflated words. Shifting on the bench, she moved herself out of his reach. "Mason, we might look good together, but you and I getting back together isn't going to happen." "Bella, you don't mean that. When you stop and remember how good it was between us, you'll agree with me." Mason put one foot on the bench and reached over to wrap his fingers around the ends of her hair. "So why don't you finish your little story time with this child? Then you can come ride around town with me in my new truck." Pulling away, she stood to her feet. "Maybe I didn't make myself clear, Mason. I don't want to go on a date or riding in your truck with you. Now Angel and I are going back into the library to finish our story." Bella reached for the little girl's hand, and they walked toward the library doors. Mason spoke in a loud voice behind her. "This isn't over, Bella. Not by a long shot. As she opened the door, she heard Mason revving his truck engine loudly before squealing the tires and driving away. She couldn't believe that after all these years, he still hadn't grown up. He was still trying to impress her with his good looks and fast vehicles. Mason still didn't realize that's not what impressed her. She'd rather have a man who helped others than a man like Mason who only thought about himself. A picture of Jack came to mind. Where had that thought come from? As quick as that idea entered her mind, she tamped it down. Bella pushed all other thoughts aside as they walked into the peaceful surroundings of the library. She and Angel drifted over to a quiet spot in the children's corner and resumed reading the story, happy to get her mind off of troubling thoughts. By Wednesday the following week, Bella had been to both interviews only to be turned down for both positions. She came home, kicked her shoes off, and with a heavy sigh walked to her office space. After plopping down her purse on the desk, she paced. Bella was determined she wouldn't let this setback defeat her. Rubbing the back of her neck, she hoped to get rid of the stress-induced tightening of her muscles. As she remembered the last few days, she realized it hadn't been only the interviews that had her tense. Yesterday, Mason had stopped by again to ask her to go to a movie with him. Once again, Bella had turned him down. His truck kicked up rocks as he drove away. Bella didn't want to make him angry, but she also didn't want to date him. She hoped he would give up, but somehow she didn't think she'd seen the last of him. Sighing once again, she turned on her computer. She needed to refocus on finding a job. Opening her browser window, she searched for job openings in creative design. She needed the work to pay off her school loans, and she wanted the money to continue to grow her online business for old and rare print books and maps. The corners of her lips turned up as she looked around the office at the bookshelves stacked with old and rare print books. The books were something she loved searching for at garage sales, estate sales, and auctions. She had set up her website 2 years ago after she was inspired by one of her college professors who had been looking for a particular book for years with no success. Bella had done some digging and had given the book to him as a gift after finishing his course. The happiness on his face was all the thanks she needed. Turning back to the computer, she looked for job openings, happily finding one. She quickly uploaded her resume, wrote a cover letter, and emailed it, hoping to get an interview. Taking a few more minutes, she went to her Rare Books website, only to see that 2 more orders had come in for out-of-print books. Searching her inventory, Bella realized she only had 1 of the books available. Doing another search, she found the book for this customer located at an out-of-the-way small town in Europe. She emailed the customer back to let them know it would take a little longer for the book to arrive. Soon Bella went to the kitchen to start supper. She had just finished cooking this chicken stir-fry when her dad came home from work. Her dad's heavy footsteps lumbered through the door, and he stopped to kiss her on the forehead. "Ah, lassie, does my heart good to see you doing a wee bit of cooking. It reminds me of your mum's wonderful meals, God rest your soul. I just hope it tastes half as good as Mum's." Bella thought of the woman who'd given birth to her, the woman she never knew, as she scooped up the rice and chicken stir-fry onto plates. Her mother died when she was born, and she never knew her growing up. All of her childhood memories were of her and her dad, but her dad had told her throughout the years how kind and generous her mother was and that she was a good cook. Knowing this inspired Bella to be more like her mum. After a short blessing for the meal, they started eating. "I didn't get either job, Dad, but I saw a new position that was accepting applications that I'm interested in. I've sent in my resume." "Maybe it's a sign you're to work for Jack, lassie." Her dad winked at her. "Dad, getting turned down for a job is not a sign." Bella huffed and took a sip of water. She was convinced it was only her father who saw it that way. "This meal is as good as your mum's." Her dad's eyes twinkled merrily. "Don't try to butter me up, Dad. It won't make me change my mind." He grinned and continued eating while studying her for a moment. Now that you've learned to cook and you've got your schooling done, I'm eager to see you find a man to marry. It'll be good when you settle down with a husband you love and have children of your own." Bella nearly choked on her water. "Dad, you're jumping the gun a little, aren't you? You might be ready, but I'm not." "Aye, I suppose there's a little time yet, lassie, but don't make me wait yours, okay?" Bella took another sip of water. She didn't even know how to talk to her dad when he spouted off nonsense about seeing her married quickly. It frustrated her a little, seeing as just days ago she told her dad she was eager to get started on her own and become more independent. Sometimes it felt like whatever she said went in one ear and out the other. They had just finished eating when the loud sound of tires crunching against rocks disrupted their peaceful meal. Bella was just cleaning up the dishes when there was a loud knock on the door. Her dad opened the door wide. "Maisie, come on in. Do you want a wee spot of tea?" "Dunlin, I can always count on you to help me catch my second wind. Tea is just what I need." Maisie caught sight of Bella filling the water kettle, and she followed her dad to the kitchen table. "Bella, dear, you look beautiful as usual. Always good to see you." Bella smiled to herself as she finished boiling the water. Maisie Merriweather was her dad's younger sister. She also worked as Jack Stevenson's event coordinator and organized people in the office for him as well as at his home. Maisie had worked with Jack from the beginning of his business and knew him better than anyone, with the exception of his own family. "Good to see you too, Aunt Maisie." Bella set 2 cups of tea down in front of them. "So, Maisie, what brings you by tonight?" Her dad, never one for beating around the bush, got straight to the point. "You mean other than the fact that I wanted to stop by to visit with my own brother and niece?" Her dad just grinned at his sister and waited. "Well, there was another reason." "Thought so. What is it?" "Jack wanted me to give you this." Maisie reached into her purse and pulled out 2 envelopes and handed one to each of them. "Jack wanted to give each of you invitations to a private dinner he's having at his place on Friday night." Bella opened the envelope and saw her name in gold letters. "He's inviting us to have dinner at his home? I was under the impression that Jack invited people to his home only on rare occasions." "Yes, normally that's true, but I guess Adam's wife Elle talked Jack into having some friends over." Dunlin's gaze switched from Maisie back to his daughter. "Well then, we won't want to miss this rare moment, right, Beauty?" Of course." Bella forced a smile, but her belly was a churning mess. Being in the same room as Jack would be beyond difficult. If he tried to push her to work for him again, she would stand her ground and say no to any offer he might make. Clenching her jaw, Bella determined she would need to be at the top of her game if she was going to face Jack one more time.